At a time where everything has gone virtual, Lake International Pan-African Film Festival 6th edition takes you there. From 3rd to the 6th of November, we take you there to experience humanity through workshops, panel discussions, open forums, screenings and a gala award. Come and experience this year's festival online. Lake International Pan-African Film Festival 6th edition. Disrupt the narrative.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Lake International Pan-African Film Festival 6th edition. Indeed, we are very glad to be here despite the COVID situation. Today and this week we are going to have panel discussions. Today we are going to start with producing children content. And then tomorrow we are going to have another panel discussion on film and human rights. And on Friday, we are going to have another one on documenting African history. Also tomorrow and Friday morning, we'll be having very powerful workshops. Tomorrow on film pitching and on Friday on writing, film proposal writing. We are glad that we are here this time through the partnership and sponsorship and support of the Kenya Film Commission, the French Embassy Kenya and Somalia, Talanta Institute, the Amnesty Kenya, and we are also having ZD, and we are very glad to be here to share with you films, to share with you all these discussions. On Friday afternoon, we will also be having screenings at the Prestige Cinemas, and on Saturday, we will definitely have the Gala Award ceremony. We'd like to thank the team that is organizing this. We have got Ms. Suki Wanza, the coordinator of the LIP Festival. We have got Ms. Suki Lanzatino, the manager for the LIP Festival. Mr. Abu Melita, the production team. We also have Nicolas Adongo, also part of the production team. And we have got Ngobia Benson, also part of the production and technical team. So we'd like to thank you for all that. And I am here, the festival director, Dr. Zipi Okoth. So thanks for being here. Stay with us and let's learn. Let's know more about producing children content. And I will leave the studio so that you can enjoy the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zipi, for welcoming us to the 6th Lake International Pan-African Film Festival 2021. And for all of you who are joining us right now, be sure to interact and send in your questions. Make sure that you engage my panel of guests who have a very rich panel of guests. And then we have 2 more who will be joining us during the session. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce the 2 guests with me here. I have the audiovisual attaché from the French Embassy, that is Serge Noukoue. I hope I'm saying your name right. And I've got the, yes, am I saying that right?
Almost.
And I've got the CEO, East African Commission of Human Rights, Dr. Judy Oloo. So I'm going to allow them to first briefly introduce themselves and introduce the organizations that they represent and explain to us their mandate. I'll start with Dr. Judy Oloo.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Child rights runs in my blood, so upon invitation to be here, I did not hesitate. So as you've heard, my name is Judy Oloo, CEO of the East African Center for Human Rights and a child rights expert. So as you know, film and cinema has become a very serious part of our life. It affects and influences our children a lot. And therefore, this is a conversation that we should have had so many years ago, but I'm happy we are having it today so that we can see how to continue to do the film and to flourish within the film industry, but at the same time, looking out for the rights of our children. So I'm looking forward to very enlightening discussions, enriching discussions, and I'm sure that you will all benefit from this discourse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judy. Joining us right now is the Director of Strategy and Business Development at Kenya Film Commission. He'll be introducing himself right after Serge. Welcome, Serge. Mr. Joshua, if you could please mute your audio.
Thank you. Thank you, Edwin.
I mute my mic.
Okay. Thank you, Edwin. Just like Judith said, I'm really happy to be here. Being a part of LIPF is always a pleasure. So thank you for inviting me to this conversation. And I work for the French Embassy, as you rightfully said. I'm in charge of film and media at the French Embassy. The French Embassy has been very keen on participating in the professionalization of the film sector in Kenya. We partner with the Kenya Film Commission. I see Joshua here. We partner with all the stakeholders of the film industry at large, and we are very keen as well on animation, as we have several programs that participate in the training of Kenyan animators. That is something very important for us. And we believe animation is a very important and critical, and children's content in general. It's not just animation, but kids' content is something very important for the development of the youth, and we would like to see more local productions. We would like to contribute to the growth of that sector. So that's what I'm here to discuss today, and I'm really happy to be here.
All right, thank you so much. We can have Mr. Joshua Akwara explain and give us a little brief of their mandate, what they do, and why it's important for him to be here today. Mr. Joshua?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Joshua Achiya, Director of Strategy and Business Development at the Kenya Film Commission. The Kenya Film Commission is a state agency, or rather state corporation, that has been established by the government currently under the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs, and develop, promote, and market the film industry, not just in Kenya, but globally. So that is a very huge mandate, and it involves a lot. It goes further than after you have the film products. So what happens next? Issues of archiving the content also come in.
Okay. All right, we seem to have lost Mr. Joshua there, but I just want us to dive right into the conversation. Yes, Mr. Joshua, we lost you briefly, and I don't know if it's because you're on the road, but we'll keep getting back to you at this point. So I just want us to dive right in. Yes.
Yes. So briefly, that's what we do as KFC.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Joshua, and we look forward to hearing a lot from you as we continue with this discussion. Now, I want us to dive right into the discussion, and the discussion today is in and around producing children's content. Now, if there's one thing the pandemic, I'm sure, taught all of us, is how much we rely on content, not just for entertainment, but to have a semblance of a connection with our outside world. And if one thing that became very apparent is that we don't have that much children's content out there. It almost felt as though it got to a point and it became repetitive, especially for the children. So I just want to dive in and ask, and of course, for the avoidance, Mr. Serge clarified that when it comes to children's content, we're not just talking about animation. It's any and all content that is geared towards the audience that is children and educates them. And so I just want us to first understand, and I'm going to direct this to Dr. Judy Oloo, who is a child's right expert. When it comes to children's content, what are we supposed to look out for in terms of how do we know this is suitable for children? And how do we say, no, this should be something that needs an evaluation?
Thank you. As you rightly said, during the COVID pandemic, we've come to realize that TV, which is cinema and other things related to film, have become a big part of our life. But then children should not only be looked at from the consumer perspective, which of course they are, seeing the number of Cartoon Networks and other children programs that we have. But then in terms of child protection, we have to look at children as consumers, children as participants in these various films and activities. And children, when it comes to issues of advertisement, for example, and even when we're talking about situations where we are reporting things like election and election results, which are really things that are sensitive because children have stakes as well. But then human rights of children are also involved in the process of this, because as children participate in these activities, there's the issue of consent, of which they have no right to give consent because they have no capacity rather to give consent. And so do we ask parents to give consent on behalf of children? That is one consideration. The other one is right to privacy. How far and wide should this content be circulated? Is consent given, or the privacy of the child protected during filming? Those are some of the things that we need to look at. The other one would be the issue of dignity. One of the things that I've constantly raised in the various circles I am in, I see that when films are made of children of Africa specifically, you find that they take pictures of dirty children with mucus or snot on their noses, children who don't look so clean. And I don't think that children in our homes look like the children that you see on those films. So where is the dignity of these children? Is their dignity protected? So you see that with the advent of film and cinema and this industry, we find that even though as parents we want to take care of our children, we are limited to an extent with regard to the exposure that they get elsewhere. And so there are certain rights that emanate as a result of children participating or observing films and cinemas, and therefore the rights question comes to the fore. And those are some of the things that we need to address, or some of the things that we need to start thinking about, even as we think about children as participants, children as consumers of cinema and films.
It's very great to hear
Those
that
are
we
my
always have
original
to.
thoughts.
Exactly. When you think about the human rights, that is amazing work. On the same question, when it comes to the shortage of children's content, I want to direct this to Serge, because when we talk about level of entry, and I like that in your introduction, you talked about working in this with in conjunction with the players in this industry to be able to expand the amount of content that we get here. What are some of the barriers that you think are stopping people from engaging in producing children's content? Because there's definitely not a shortage for any other type of content that is being churned out in the region in terms of film and TV. But when it comes to children's content, there's always a deficiency. What do you think are the factors contributing to a barrier of entry?
Edwin, I think one of the key issue here has to do with funding. I said in my introduction that children's content was not limited to animation, but a lot of it is animation, and animation costs a lot more to produce than regular content, in a way, than what we call live action. Animation requires some equipment. Animation requires some skills. It's just the entry point is higher than for the other types of content. So I think that's definitely one of the issues that Kenya and the continent at large is facing. Then I don't know what the other issues are. I think just like it is the case for other type of content, you also have Judy mentioned the Cartoon Networks and all of that. You also have maybe some kind of complacency because there's always been on television content for children. It was not necessarily specifically for African children, but it was always there for children. And then so maybe there was not that sense of urgency that it was important to create local content that would address local realities for children. And I believe that's what the issue is right now. Africa, if I'm not mistaken, Africa is the youngest continent of the world. So you would think that we would have more. If anything, you would think that there would be more content for children on this continent than anywhere else, but that's not the case. And so, so I think those issues of training and the issues of access to equipment have to be addressed. And again, the French embassy, I will mention here that there's a partnership with the school ADMI that has been created 2 years ago of basically ADMI partnering with a French school called Rubica, which is one of the best schools in the world when it comes to animation. And the idea is to have that kind of high-level training available here in Kenya for people who want to to do animation. But one of the issues, again, and maybe it's because this industry is quite new, is still new in the country, but it hasn't been easy for ADMI to recruit students on a regular basis. I think there's still a bit of a stigma. A lot of families think that there is no future or no real careers for in these kind of areas, and so that's also a change that needs to happen, a shift in mentality, so that people can understand that these are respectable careers, and that people who venture into animation can make a decent living and not be stigmatized. So that's also something that we have to think about, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. And I want to quickly move to Mr. Joshua with some question, but now from a government angle, because Kenya Film Commission is mandated with, of course, running our film industry here. Is there a way we are incentivizing people to produce children content? Is there a way we are also sensitizing and bringing them together to educate them on the kind of content that they can produce for children? Mr. Joshua?
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe to answer your question, I will go straight away into what we did as a commission during the COVID pandemic period. During that particular period, that was that is the year 2020 and the year 2021, the commission partnered with the Communications Authority, that is CA, and we came up with a program called the Film Empowerment Program. We ran Cycle 1, and in Cycle 2, the focus was on children's content. So under that, we provided grant support to various filmmakers under development and also under production stages, specifically to produce children's content, because we understood that during that particular period of time, most of the children were at home. So as the government, we were concerned, what were they watching? So as an incentive, we ran that particular program. Currently, we are running Cycle 3. And as we are talking, we have also drafted the film incentives, which we hope to present to our cabinet secretary. We are working as a multi-stakeholder team in government and also the industry, where we have the industry association representatives in the committee, basically as a form of stakeholder engagement. We have government entities like KFCB, KWS, ourselves, the ministry. So we will be presenting to the cabinet secretary a comprehensive package that we deem that we deem will respond to the needs of the film industry. In addition, during that particular period of time when COVID set in, there were some incentives that were also put forth, like for example, those who were importing the film equipment that is most of the time highly specialized. We appealed to the National Treasury and the Kenya Revenue Authority, and they were able to grant exemptions for importation of that equipment, importation and hiring of that equipment into the country. So those are some of the incentives that we've put in the place in the past, those that are there currently, and also what we are doing for the future. I hope.
All right, and I think before I let yes, that's very clear. But before I move on to the next question, I think I owe it to the creatives and producers to ask, is there a policy that is being pushed forward to at least ensure in the same way we require a percentage threshold for local content, that part of that local content is also children's content? Mr. Joshua, can you get me?
Pardon, please?
So if I may take, if I may take that question again, for the producers in the country, we've had a rise and upsurge in local content because of the requirement for, I think it is 60% of content airing to be, local content. Do we have a similar framework or policy in place, or something that's being developed so that there's a requirement for a particular percentage to be children's content?
Now, as you put it clearly, and Dr. Oloo will also be able to add on to that. What we have is just the policy framework, the legal framework for the 60-40% for local content. But then, as you're putting it, it's time we think about how also to put it in law and in our policies, and how to institutionalize, because when you look at children numbers, they are high when you compare it, for example, with the old population. So when you are looking at the market available for our films, children actually form a big percentage. So maybe as we discussed, those are some of the issues we should be able to look at. But I believe that Tari will add more in terms of the legal aspects of children's content.
All right, thank you. Now, film is an art form, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when it comes to art imitating life, that is exactly what we see in what is depicted. And this question is going to Dr. Judy Oloo, and I'll also have Serge contribute onto it. We have situations that are coming up right now where some of the things that we are trying to protect our children against, and as you aptly put it earlier, are the same things they are interacting with out there. It's also right now with the access to internet and so many other devices, then we also the checks that have been put in place and previously worked, where the parents or the custodians, then are not as effective. So what can be done, and or rather, what is the East African Commission of Human Rights trying to do and plug into the film industry to ensure that the reality of protection of children is achieved?
Yeah, thank you. Just a point of correction: it's the East African Center,
Yes.
not East African Commission.
Oh,
East African Center for
Okay.
Human Rights. Yes, the
Right.
child rights organization. So we advocate for we have had conversations with the Kenya Communications Authority, just to be sure to check that the age limit that has been set on various programs that children are allowed to watch are observed. We find that even though there's a law regarding what kind of content children are allowed to watch, in this country you find that there's certain explicit content that is viewed even during family time, which is between say during the day up to 9 p.m. in the evening. And so while the law is there, in terms of enforcement, it is not being enforced. And so one of the things that we are saying, or the conversation we are having with the Communications Authority, is to ensure that this provision is adhered to the letter, just so we are able to avoid embarrassing situations whereby children are watching content they're not supposed to watch during dinner or in the presence of their parents. But again, watching this content in the presence of their parents is not really the issue here, but spoiling the innocence of children. We are supposed to protect their innocence. We are supposed to, if you see what is happening in the country right now, there's so much violence. Children have learned so much violence. We have seen children killing each other in schools. We have seen so much fight among children, children taking knives to school, children burning schools. Some of these are as a result of the violence that they watch in the movies, the violence either on Netflix or on TV or on local content in any other way. And so it is our responsibility, or we advocate for parents, we advocate for all stakeholders in the child rights sector, and also just parents, priests, and anyone else who has responsibility of taking care of a child, to ensure that our children are not exposed to this kind of elements that spoil their sanity, that spoil their innocence, and make them be affiliated or be bent towards criminal activities or juvenile delinquency.
All right. I appreciate and I love the fact that you've talked about the bodies and of organizations that are being brought into this conversation. But it's very notable that the producers, the filmmakers, have been left out of that conversation. At what point are they brought in? Because then they are the guys who have the creative control. How do they get brought in to understand the sensitivity of the issue?
To be very honest, we have not engaged filmmakers as an industry or the film industry per se. What we have who we have engaged is the Kenya Communications Authority. But now that I'm in touch with ZP, Dr. ZP, so maybe this is the entry point for me to be able to start to advocate for rights of children to be protected against illicit content, so that we can preserve their sanity and also their innocence. So this is the entry point, I guess, the
All right.
turning
Thank you
point,
so
so
much.
to speak.
Now,
Yes.
yes, and that's very yes. Let's hope at the end of the Sixth Clip Festival we'll have at least some frameworks of work moving in, because I think it's pivotal to have to have the filmmakers and the producers on board, so that then they also understand what is being done by the government and other bodies. Now, Mr. Serge, you talked about an issue of funding, and I can see people in the comment section are agreeing with that, and it's very important that, and I guess these are filmmakers who are saying yes, there is a barrier to entry and what is going in. And so perhaps sometimes they go for the low-hanging fruits to make content that ideally would be easier to make, and sometimes that it doesn't touch on children's content. How do we start to navigate or go around the issue of funding? Because I know funding is a big issue when it comes to any production. How can filmmakers and producers start to get around that?
Okay, thank you, Edwin.
Yes, right.
Before getting into that point, I would love to also add to what Dr. Judy was saying about the situations where you have children watching content that is not appropriate at the dinner table. It would have been great if the KFCB was here. I believe that they're supposed to come to this conversation, and I'm hoping they can come at some point to see what is not working on the implementation standpoint. But also, I would like to point out the responsibility of the parents, because at the end of the day, children are not the ones who make decisions in the household, and so I think it's very important as well for parents to be attentive and to understand what are the dangers that can lie in on the screen, and so that they can also actively be involved into what their children can watch and what their children should not watch. That's something that should be mentioned, because it's a two-way street. It's not just the children making up what they're going to watch in the evening or during the day. Now, when it comes to funding, I understand that at this point there's a lack of availability for that kind of funding for that kind of content. But I would also encourage the creatives, and especially the producers of such content, to think outside the box, because the film industry in general is just a very difficult, tough, competitive environment. It is very difficult, and funding doesn't just come like that magically. But at the same time, I believe the producers have a lot of data that is going in their favor. Kenya is a young country. Africa in general is a young continent, as I mentioned before. And so therefore the demographics is really going in the way of the producers. And therefore the producers have a case when they go and engage with corporate entities. I mean, at the end of the day, kids market is a huge market, whether it's about the type of food that is for children, or the type of entertainment, all of that. So you have naturally a lot of private entities that have an interest in getting kids' eyeballs, if I may say it like that. And so I think it's very important for the producers to not just knock at the door of the Kenya Film Commission or the French embassy, for that matter, but it's really important for them to also engage the private entities and see with them how they could come together and put out content that would make sense for those brands, for them to advertise and find an economic model, because at this point there is no economic model, there is no incentive that really favors, I would say, the growth of that industry. But the producers have to do that job. They have to show the numbers, the data, and then I believe things will start changing as well.
All right, that is absolutely fantastic. Before we go to the next question, I'd like to check out the comment section and see what questions are coming through and see if we can get something from there. Remember, guys, if you're tuned in, you can always interact and ask any questions. We are discussing producing children's content, and I'm joined here by KFC, joined here by representatives from the Human Rights and French Embassy as well. Now, Vigilance Atieno, who's joining us from YouTube, has a question for Mr. Joshua. We've seen Kenya Film Commission engage and open a lot of film clubs in schools across the country. How then can KFC utilize these clubs to promote the production of children films? I'll take that again. We have seen Kenya Film Commission engage and open a lot of film clubs in schools across the country. How then can KFC utilize these clubs to promote production of children's films? Mr. Joshua.
Yeah, it's indeed true from the participant, or rather from the audience, the person who has asked that question. It is indeed true that the Kenya Film Commission is currently running what we call the school outreach program, where basically we are targeting secondary schools. And if you go to most of these secondary schools, you'll find they have what we call the drama clubs. So when you bring in the equipment aspect, like for example, if you give them a camera, when you introduce the aspect of filming equipment to drama, you basically, you will have basically converted it from being a drama club to a film club. So what is the goal of this particular program? We are trying to promote aspects of film to our children at a younger age, introducing them to the filming aspects, various aspects of film when they are still at that young age, so that they are familiar with basic aspects. Like for example, in our program currently, we are teaching them, and in this particular program, it's also important to note that we are collaborating with Canon, the manufacturers and distributors of cameras. So once we open these film clubs, we give them this equipment so that these students are able to use them, for example, for photography, for videography. It is so that they get the basic skills, the basic ideas of how to use this particular equipment. And remember, currently the government is implementing the CBC program, where it's all about identifying talent. So in line with that question, amongst these students, we could be having filmmakers, so that we are able to identify and nurture this talent at a younger age, rather than wait for them to get out of school to start learning aspects of film, because that's what the current statistics have shown us. If you ask most of the famous filmmakers in Kenya today, they will tell you, I joined the industry at 40, at 50. But we want to reverse that and start nurturing that talent by promoting aspects of film production in schools at a young age.
Oh, that's great. Now, in the circuit of film festivals that happened 2 years ago, this was also an issue that came up when it comes to producing children's content. And one of the things that was pointed out aptly by quite a number of filmmakers, especially at the Toronto International Film Festival, was the fact that sometimes the communication made to the mass audience about the importance of protecting children from some particular type of content at times appears combative. And I just want to hear from every panel member, and I'll start with Serge. Do you feel there's a change that requires to happen in how we all receive the communication of why we need to protect our children, of why as parents, as guardians, as the adults in the room, need to be vigilant at all times of what children are watching?
Sorry, do you mind repeating the last part of the question? I don't think I heard you.
Oh, sorry. Like a lot of the communication, a lot of the failure for producing great children content has been cited to be the combative sort of communication that comes from the authorities tasked with that. And so I just want to hear a commentary, and also in terms of what you think can be done to change the way we communicate to the mass audience, so that every adult in the room, whether you're a parent, whether you're a guardian, or just any other adult, you're cognizant of the fact that it is your responsibility to look out for what children are seeing.
I think it's a very good point. I think the communication towards the importance of safeguarding the kids and the children's innocence in general could be more creative. And that's definitely something that I think the authorities should look into. But also, I think the main issue is that overall, this is not considered a priority for the typical household. I think the protection of that innocence and what the child has access to is for a lot of reasons is not considered a priority, and I think that's something that has to change. And obviously, it's also not going to change overnight. But the only thing I can say is that yes, the communication towards that has to be adapted. It has to be more creative. It has to really, in order to be efficient, it has to be more creative, and it cannot just be as it's been over the years. It has to really take a new approach so that it can really reach the people and strike a chord with different families. So I think yes, a lot of the responsibility is on the authorities to come up with campaigns that would be more engaging, that would be more impactful in general. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And Dr. Judith, I imagine that at your position and in a society where we are used to talking down to children and not talking to the children, you might face quite a lot of challenges when you're trying to explain why it is important to safeguard children's rights. So what are some of the things you're doing to help demystify these kinds of rights, children's rights to the adults in the room?
I think that there needs to be a multidisciplinary approach. First, I would like to say that not all content is bad. We have certain kind of explicit content, and that is geared towards adult. It's only bad when it's watched by children. So I think having a multisectoral approach, in the sense that speaking to parents and making them understand why, because not all TV is bad, and also not all cartoons are good, because these days we see a lot of cartoon that has certain innuendos of sex and sexual content, which is really not good. But then when speaking to children, since we want there's something that is called child participation. It is important for them to understand why we don't want them to watch this content, as opposed to just telling them, no, bring that remote, or you sort of lock the remote. So you just have to you need to educate them. You need to involve them and tell them this is not content that you're supposed to watch. Content that has drug abuse or drug substance use, content that has sex and sexual innuendo, content that has violence is not meant for people who are below the age of 18. And that way, even when you are in your sitting room watching TV with children, the moment they see that parental advisory, they simply walk out, because they understand that it is not something that is within their age group to watch. But if you just tell them, no, this you're not supposed to do, it is bad for you, but not explaining why, then you find that they will go and watch these programs when you are not there. They'll be watching. Nowadays, we used to sneak around to watch The Bold and Beautiful, which had very explicit content, I must say. But why? Because we were told you cannot watch it. So the more you are told you cannot watch it, the more curious you want to see what is it about. So involving children in decision making, telling them why they should not do it, as opposed to just saying no, I think makes a lot of difference. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think I'm going to direct this next question to Mr. Joshua. And I'd have hoped KFCB was here, because then what Dr. Judith has said is very true. Sometimes the way we communicate a ban, or the way we communicate, don't watch this, it raises curiosity. Sometimes even informs you of some things you didn't know about. So I don't know. I don't know if Mr. Joshua, you're able to give us insight into this. How are we able to actually meet this interest of the children in a way that we are not also just throwing them or dangling whatever they shouldn't be seeing in the first place in their faces by sensationalizing it?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to start by repeating what my fellow panelists have said. Not all content is bad for the children, or if I can use the word negative. Most of the content produced is actually good for that one that targets children. It's actually good for them. So the percentage that is bad is actually very minimal. And then now back to your question, what can we do about this content that is not suitable for kids? Now KFCB is not here, but one of the roles they play is whenever any producer wants to do filming in Kenya, whether a local producer or from outside the country, he or she has to be licensed by government, and the licensing currently is done by the Kenya Film Classification Board. And at that point, you have to make a declaration that whatever content, whatever you are going to produce, whatever content that you are going to come up with, that will ultimately end up in various distribution channels, which can be the TV or the social media platforms, is strictly in adherence with the license. So by licensing alone, there are terms and conditions that the various producers are meant to adhere to as one way of controlling content which has negative or adversarial effects to our children. Then apart from that, as Dr. Judith has put it, there are a number of stakeholders involved. The government has a responsibility to ensuring that we have clean content targeting our children. We have the parents, we have the teachers, and also the filmmakers themselves. So this is a collective effort. We cannot say let's leave it to the child rights experts alone. No, let them play their part. Government plays its part, and it's the responsibility of each and every one of us. Remember, we are dealing with children. These are mostly under 18. Therefore, they need to be guided, whether inside the house or outside the house. And when we're looking at this content, sometimes the parents play a big role. If you buy your 10-year-old kid, for example, a smartphone, she's able to access various contents using the smartphones. So to what extent do you have that control? That's why I'm emphasizing the fact that all stakeholders, parents, teachers, the rights experts, have a role to play in educating, in informing our children and guiding them so that they have access to clean content.
All right, thank you so much. I want us to look at some of the comments and questions that are coming in. Remember, if you're tuning in, we are discussing producing children's content, and this is at the 6th Pan-African International Pan-African Film Festival. So remember, you can always send in your questions. Now, before we get to the next thing of discussion, I just want us to quickly stream through some of the comments. I can see we have Rachel Njeriwa Inaina, a film producer. I totally agree with Serge. Producers need to make the business aspects work. When we have a profitable industry, many other things will follow suit. From Facebook, we have Nyacharo Victor, says, I know the children issue on consumption of content is very sensitive, but I feel we haven't really focused on our potential locally. Film producers need to work on how to tell the African content in a manner that is engaging without necessarily incorporating the Western culture or sugarcoating obscenity. Bouncing off from what Victor has said, when it comes to telling our own stories, and I think it's Serge who had mentioned that earlier, that sometimes it's actually Dr. Oloo who had actually mentioned that earlier, that sometimes we have a lot of Western influence where we even have cartoons that are not particularly great. Of course, we talked about one of the barrier being the kind of equipment, but not everything has to be put in animation. So let me just pose this. Why do we think we are not telling enough of our children's stories to be able to form part of the content, or rather our indigenous African stories? Because Africa was largely socialized in an oral way. These things were told as stories, as fables, as legends, as myths. And we had so many that had lessons that were brought into the young children as they were coming up. And the main mandate of most of the children's content, other than entertaining, is to educate. So why is it that we do not have a lot of African stories told in children's content format? Dr. Judy, would you like to comment on that?
I don't know. I wouldn't say why. Since my background is not in film.
Yes.
But I think maybe most of our, I mean, we all parents want their children to grow towards I don't know, maybe English civilization, where they speak English, they start to become really westernized, and therefore the space for telling African stories is almost diminished as children go to tell different stories like Cinderella and other things which they identify with more, because that is what is in vogue, as opposed to stories of Beautiful Nyakio. I'm not sure if any of you knows a book like that we read during the days when we were growing up. So I'm not from this background, but I would say maybe because most parents are inclined towards westernization, and so they want their children to speak English and to be socialized around what is forward looking, quote unquote, as opposed to our culture, which maybe is not even examined in many places, or something like that, vaguely.
All right. Serge, you've gotten an opportunity to work with quite a number of African countries, especially when it comes to their film industries. Is this an issue that is only localized in Kenya, or are we seeing this happening across several other film markets when it comes to telling indigenous African stories as children content?
Unfortunately, no, it's not just Kenya. It's not just Kenya. I think overall in Africa, there's definitely not nearly as many African stories that are being told in the form of children's content, and there's many layers to that. There's many reasons as to why that is the case. But I like to be positive. I like to look at the glass half full as opposed to half empty. And I would say that right now is a really good time in general for producers and filmmakers and script writers and all of that to tell their stories. There are many avenues that are opening up that were not there a few years ago. I'm sure you are all aware of the new call for entries by Netflix with UNESCO, for instance, that is interested in getting folk tales and other traditional African stories being retold by filmmakers today. So I think that's what the focus should be on right now. The focus is on the fact that it is very, I mean, it is easier. It's never easy, but it is easier today to produce content. It is easier today to find ways, even through social media, to reach out to an audience that is both local and global. So these are opportunities for all the creatives out there. These are opportunities that the creatives have to really grasp with both hands, and that's what is the most important thing. I think there are many reasons as to why in the past things have been different. economic reasons and also cultural reasons. But now is really a good time in 2021 to tell the African stories, because the world is waiting for the African story. This is the piece of the puzzle that has been missing for a long time, and everybody is now very curious. And by the way, this is something that you can see through across the spectrum. Even African music is now reaching the world in a way that you will go in Europe or in America, and in the West in general, and the top 5 or top 10 artists are mainly African, which is something very unusual. We have this possibility through social media and just new technology in general to reach out to more people in a way that is faster and that is easier and is less costly than it ever was. So that's, I think creatives out there that are listening to this or that are watching, I mean, the message is that you have to tell your stories. And the good news is that there are so many stories that have not been told that you actually have quite a long way to go if you want to tell those stories, because you have so many stories in every corner of this country, every corner of East Africa, every corner of Africa that are yet to be told.
That's fantastic. It's good to get that overview and see what the kind of endless possibilities that we have out there when it comes to producing children's content. Now, I want to come back to something that Serge had mentioned earlier, but I'm just gonna. I want KFC and KFCB to answer into this. I can see KFCB has just joined the chat, but they're going to be joining us later. So when KFC has had training programs where they've gone into counties, where they've gone into constituencies to train upcoming filmmakers in workshop formats. Earlier on, Serge said that even though ADMI has already struck a very good deal with one of the best trainers for animators, they're having a challenge recruiting people into those programs, and perhaps it's because it's not yet been understood very well what am I getting out of this industry. So my question to Mr. Joshua is, how can these regulating authorities like KFC and KFCB, especially at the tertiary level, start to regulate or monitor what is being trained at tertiary levels to ensure that it aligns with the industry and it prepares producers and filmmakers who are ready to actually produce meaningful children's content? Mr. Joshua?
Yeah, in terms of the trainings at the tertiary institution, and as far as content is concerned, that would, because the content would at that level mainly be academic, what the two institutions, that is KFC and KFCB, can do is work hand in hand with the Ministry of Education through the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, so that we are able to come up with a curriculum that is responsive to the current industry needs, that is from the academic perspective. Then you've also mentioned about the workshops that we've been having at the counties and the constituency level. That's indeed true. We are doing that in partnership with the counties and the constituencies, that is through the national government constituency development fund, to try to reach out to our youths. And apart from just partnering with the two institutions, we are bringing in expert trainers from the Kenya Film School, which is the only government school that has been established and owned by government in Kenya, to train from the basic level to a higher level, ranging from aspects of script writing all the way to distribution, that is in between. So those particular programs target rather the youths, the practical aspects, that's why they end up, for example, in production of short films. So that's where our focus is. But in terms of the tertiary institutions, we can only work hand in hand with the Ministry of Education and KICD in terms of determining the content that is suitable for teaching.
All right, thank you so much for that. And I like that you've talked about distribution, from the point of scripting to distribution into the market. Now, the film industry is very largely profit driven, and sometimes that is where we lose, where we are going to strike a balance. And I can see one of the questions is in alignment with that. Producer here, Rich and Jerry Wanena, asks, do we have a good market for children's stories? Because perhaps that could explain the disconnect that exists in the production of children's stories. Do we have our own local distribution or a market that is sustainable and easily accessible for our children's content? I'd like to, yes.
Maybe to answer that question generally, because it also applies to children's content. Generally, and this is from studies that we've undertaken in the past, the uptake of local content is still low compared to foreign content. So there's a lot of foreign content being consumed in Kenya that is significantly or proportionately higher than local content. And that's why we have come up with the programs, and fellow panelists have talked about it. Let's tell our own local stories. Let's promote our own local stories. That way, we will also be providing solutions to the aspects of distribution. Because when we are talking about distribution, we are talking about now reaching a final consumer. If it is children in this case, are they now able to access it and watch it? But then the challenge goes back again to the producers, and we've had several forums with them. When you're producing, from the time you are scripting, you need to know who is this that will watch, whom am I targeting, and therefore you must come up with a product, you must come up with a film that will be easily be accepted, so that we are able to deal with the issues of supply and demand of film products in the local of the local film products in our market locally and globally.
Thank you so much, and that's great insight. I think perhaps that's a challenge to us, even as we are running through this festival, to try and come together and understand how are we bringing market and helping the distribution flow. Now, Dr. Judy, if you had something to add on children's stories.
Yes, thank you for that. I just want to pair it up with what Joshua is saying about local content. I have a different view. While in the past there was really not much interest in local content, now I see a trend, and I'm a lay person. I'm not in the film industry, but I know that people watch a lot of local content. Now we have from the days of Tidy High, from the days of Machachari, these days we have local content spoken in Swahili that plays just before the news or before 9 o'clock, and people really watch this content, as opposed to in the past where the maybe the content was not very enjoyable, or the quality of the videos or the quality of the films was not all that. So I think the more we produce more quality local content, and we are able to replace them with obsolete or very old foreign content that we are getting. And so it's not a question of market. You bring us, we are the watchers, or we are the people who sit to watch these things. Bring them on, we will watch them, and we'll be very happy to relate with local content like that, as opposed to really sensationalized romance from Mexico and so on and so forth, which does not really tell our story. So maybe that's just a challenge, that as opposed to what there used to be the case case in the past. Now we are very open to receiving local content. You should come to my household when Selena or this other Pete or whatever is playing. Everybody is seated and we watch it. Look at what happens when Nigerian movies came to Kenya. People dropped everything else and went to watch Nigerian movies, and they started speaking like Nigerians. That tells you that we are hungry for local content. Bring them on, we will watch. Do away with these other things that are really once in a while we could enjoy them, but let our film industry or our cinema industry tell our story.
All right.
That's
Thank
what
you
I
so
wanted
much.
to add.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oloo. Now I'm looking at we are just closing in the first hour, and I want to see if you're joining us right now. What we're discussing today is producing children's content. We've just concluded our first hour, and I can just see KFCB has joined in. I'd like for Nelly Mluka to briefly introduce herself or the KFCB representative and tell us what your mandate is, and especially in relation to children's content.
Okay, first of all, I want to apologize. My colleague Emma was supposed to be here, but today we've had a busy day because we are having our PC evaluation, and it's been going on and on because definitely they have to be thorough. And unfortunately, again, the PA to the CEO forgot to talk to Emma, so I've stepped in. I believe I'll ably be stepping in. You can see I'm also driving in the Nairobi jam, but that doesn't matter. Otherwise, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And more so, I know I'd really promised Zippy that we would be here, and this would be a letdown if we are not on. Kenya Film Classification Board is a regulatory board. Ideally, our first objective is, or rather mandate, is to ensure that we regulate film and broadcast content with the main, or rather the key objective of ensuring that the content that is being produced within the territory of Kenya should conform to our national values, should also conform to our national aspirations and morality. And the aim is to ensure that children are protected from exposure to inappropriate or adult content. And ideally, the topic of today is also a topic of our interest. You realize that we do our regulatory job at 5 levels of the creation, right from the creation, distribution, broadcast, possession, and even exhibition. And KFCB examines and rates film and broadcast content. The objective is to give age suitability so that when we are talking about children, we know what children can watch under the GE. So it's our duty to give that consumer advice to the parents, to caregivers, to people who are in charge of children, including teachers, so that children are not exposed to things that are not suitable for children. And then secondly, we have the watershed period that is under KICA 411. It mandates the Kenya Film Classification Board to ensure, rather enforce the watershed period. That is the period between 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. by ensuring that during that period we monitor to see that whatever is being displayed on TV or being broadcast should actually have the interest of children at heart, so that the children are not exposed to, or rather prematurely exposed to adult content, or at times it may not even be adult, but things like you saw the other day, we gave an advisory about Netflix. So you find that as you look at that, there's so much of probably adult and other things that would even be dangerous to the vulnerable groups, leave alone the children. But we know children are impressionable, more impressionable. So it is our mandate to either give the advisory, to also give the age appropriateness, and just to ensure that children are not being exposed. Looking at...
If I could interrupt briefly, Madam Nelly, and because you've cited what happened recently with an advisory for particular content on Netflix, and Netflix is one of those over-the-top protocols, such as YouTube, Hulu, and the rest. And perhaps I'd like to find out What are you doing to ensure that, because these over-the-top protocols, most of them are very hard to regulate, what are you putting in place to ensure that at the end of the day, everyone is well sensitized to make sure that kids do not have access, or children do not have access to content that they should not be watching? Because I feel like it might be also difficult to give an advisory for each and every piece of content.
Definitely, it is not that easy, but we are trying to amalgamate and put together different methods, different ways. First of all, you realize that the work cannot be done by an individual, by just one agency. And that's why we are now doing a lot of partnerships, and especially even to the service providers. Like in this case, we reached out to Netflix and we made it clear to them that we are going to offer this advisory. And we asked them if they have any safeguards or controls. It is up to them to ensure that the safeguards and the controls are put outside there, so that caregivers, parents, and guardians get to know what they can, how to control, or rather how to guide the children. And then secondly, you see parents, why we are trying to give advisory, that parents are responsible also for what children are watching from such platforms, because the child would need either a smartphone or a laptop. There's need for some bundles, there's all that. So there's a big role that is being played by an adult, and those are the adults that we are reaching out to through public sensitization. We actually do media literacy. We have child online protection and digital parenting, things that we've been doing together with the CA and other public and private organizations, to just ensure that we keep empowering the relevant people who have that duty to stay with the children. The Kenya Film Classification Board is also working with the Kenya National Drama and Film Festival. We are working with Cooper and all the like-minded partners, public and private, to just ensure that we keep on passing this message to the right people, so that as we work, for example, with the Kenya National Drama and Film Festival, it's from the ECD all the way to the universities. Then we start targeting the children directly, but at the same time, school where children believe what they are being told. You remember, they believe the teachers more than they even believe their parents. So through different types of partnerships, and then just engaging in a robust campaign of the same over different channels, we believe that we are moving somewhere. It is not easy, of course, as you've said, but we are also working with Google, we are working with Facebook. Okay, don't ask me about TikTok because that one is just in another world and at another level altogether. But even when we come to platforms and forums like this, every time we believe when one or two children are being protected, 3, then it becomes better and better. We've also approached lately all the broadcasters, the major houses, to ensure that they bring their content for classification. And I can tell you, we don't need really to put it out there. Even today, we were with one of them. They are compliant and they are doing whatever they can do. I know with the COVID, everybody, especially the broadcasters, they're looking for money, and they look at what sells. But we are looking at the child. Should it sell at the expense of the child? So yes, the internet may be difficult, but as we continue to work with Google, where we are working with them to ensure that YouTube is safe. The only challenge, as I've said, as per now, remains TikTok, but I'm sure with the time. And then we also have WhatsApp. You find that some of the things that are actually passed from one person to another, there again, the role of the parent comes in. How did your child get a smartphone and bundles and started having access to that kind of information? So generally, I can say it's a collective responsibility. Your responsibility, our responsibility. And we should not just look at what the children are exposed to in terms of consumption. What about when the performers and the filmmakers are out there in the field? What are the children being exposed to? Because I know you have children, the role during your production. do you give children adult roles? When the adults are shooting, maybe there's some adult kind of language. You find there may be adult actions. Are the children protected? So that's why I'm saying it's a collective responsibility that we are on the right way.
Yes, and that's
Thank
very
you.
fantastic, and that's a great job the KFCB is doing. And I just want to quickly go over to the comment section because we've already gotten a lot of producers and filmmakers who are joining in. And I'm going to take 3 questions, then we get back to the conversation. Rachel Njeriwa Inaina, who is a film producer, asks, what is the government doing to encourage the production of children content? Also, we need to, she says, we also need to have more public participation for the same. I think this question goes majorly to you, Nelly, because you do licensing and you mentioned that earlier. When talk about what is the government doing to incentivize production of children's content, because sometimes the content that we are having to regulate or censor or completely do away with is because it's easier to produce. So are we giving rebates? Are we discounting how much it takes for a license if you're producing children content, or what's happening on the ground?
Okay, first of all, thank you. I wanted to say partly that could be partly our question and partly for KFC because Kenya Film Classification Board regulates, but our sister agency is a promoter and a marketer. And most of all this is actually their mandate. But, well, as I said, we work together. It's a collective responsibility. When you start looking at licenses, you'll find that the KFCB license is one of the cheapest licenses so far. This multiple licensing that come with the probably you go to the airport, you find you have immigrations, and then you have KCAA, then you go to the counties, and then if you are doing it in Nairobi. So I would say it is the idea of multiple licenses. Unfortunately, everybody has their mandate. And when the filmmakers, the producers, and all that talk about film, they forget that KFCB will give you that license to go and shoot. But when you reach out there, you'll find many other licenses, which I've said are called the multiple licenses. So initially, at one time, we tried to see how we could come together and just look at having one license for all. But again, you'll agree with them. Maybe as you go out there to shoot, you are in a KWS area at the airport and all that. They have their mandates, and KFCB cannot change the mandate of another agency.
Okay, that's all right. Mr. Joshua, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, there are many ways because you've talked. Your question is direct on what
Yes.
we're doing to promote children's content. There are many ways. Serge has talked about gaming and animation. This is one area where we really have a lot of children's content, and therefore when we look at our current capacity building programs, they are mostly focused on gaming and animation. That is in terms of capacity building, because if you capacity building in certain specialized areas where children's content is predominant, then you are likely to have more children's content in the market. So that's what I can add in addition to what Nelly has just given.
Fantastic. Now, I'd like to go in terms of supporting producers, and I think I want to start with Serge, and that is coming off a question that I see from a Kenyan filmmaker who's by the name Joseph Ochieng Obel. He says, as a content creator, I have hurdles to access the market for children content. So I have the content, but the market seems to be narrow. So, Mr. Serge, you talked about how the French embassy supports a lot of these filmmakers who are doing work by actually giving them resources or directing them to informational resources and where to get them. Here we have a filmmaker that is Joseph Ochieng talking about he has a lot of children's content but has no market to take it to. So how do we start to help such a person, such a producer?
Thank you, Edwin. One of the things that we've been doing as well is to support the participation of Kenyan producers or animators to festivals, big festivals like the Festival of Annecy in France, And that's really one of the most efficient way for young filmmakers to make an entry onto the market, basically, because at the end of the day, even if your film is not in official selection in those festivals, what matters is for you to be there and attend the market, network with the producers, the distributors, the broadcasters. That's really the key, and it's something that is invaluable for the growth of any filmmakers, and I think it's even more important in the animation sector and the children's content sector. So that's something very concrete, a very concrete example of one of the things that the French embassy is doing to allow the filmmakers to enter into the global market.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So Joseph, I hope you've had that and you're able to reach out for the same. Now I want to get into more about incentivizing production of children's content. We know we have the Kalasha Awards coming up and so many other entries where we have that. And then I'll start with KFC because they run the Kalasha Awards. Why haven't we incorporated categories for children geared or based content that can have awards? Because I feel that would also incentivize a lot more producers to get into that space. Mr. Joshua?
Given traditionally, Kalash has been having 33 other categories. And when you look at them, as you
Mr. Joshua, we seem to be having a challenge getting you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but with a little bit of static. We can hear you, but not as clearly.
Okay. Can I proceed or you give me a minute? Maybe check on the
I think we'll get back to you. Yes, I think you can check on your connection and then we'll get back to you for the same. So I think my issue, and perhaps I'd like for Dr. Oloo to comment on that for the next question, is how do we strike a balance between the film industry looking to create profits and versus them striking a balance to make sure that all the constituent rights that govern children are taken care of? Because ultimately it's a business, and it's starting to appear from some of the comments we're getting from the filmmakers out here that there is very, very little market or return value for a lot of the children content. So Dr. Oloo, how do you think we can start to balance or strike a balance in those two?
One of the ways of going about that is through awareness creation. Like I said, not all content is negative. Every content has its constituent, right? And so if we create awareness among the population of who is supposed to watch what and why, I think it would go a long way in just saying that, hey, it's not wrong to watch TV. It's just you have to choose your content right. So awareness creation is critical. And also, insofar as filmmakers and cinema people are concerned, they're supposed to be sensitized on rights of children when it comes to cinematography. Someone just mentioned around filming at the airport, filming in the sea, or filming, say, in a KWS place. What are the rights of children in such circumstances? How are we protecting them in the course of filming this? And what kind of things are they getting exposed to? So I think that would go a long way, sensitizing them, and awareness, which is the same as awareness creation anyway, but in different contexts. Awareness creation among children, awareness creation among parents, awareness creation among filmmakers. I think it would go a long way in creating the balance that we are so lacking.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Mr. Joshua, I would like to get back to you and see if we can get you clearly so that you're able to give commentary on the question of why we are not including children categories in awards.
Yes, I hope you can hear me clearly now.
It's better now? Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes. Now, when you look at Kalash Awards, we have 23 categories. And out of those categories, we only have
Mr. Joshua, we've lost you 1 second.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, we can. Yes, we can get you now.
Yes.
Maybe bring your device closer to you for sound.
Yes. Yes. So under the special awards, We have only one award, that's the best kids or children production out of the 33 awards. So because after these years we'll be having it on 10th of November, that's when we'll be having the 11th Kalasha Awards. But starting from the 12th, we will be revising these awards, and with the feedback that I've gotten from today's engagement, we will be able to consider that.
All right, thank you. So we've been able to see that some of the ways we're able to incentivize for producing children's content is, of course, including them in award categories. Then we talked about funding. I just want to hear from the panel, are there any other ways in which we can incentivize, you feel we can incentivize production of children's content? Because ultimately, people have, the people in the film industry have to step up and get into it, but they only get into it if there's incentives. I think I'd like to start with Serge on the same. What are some other incentives you think we can lure production of children's content into? Serge, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. I think you had a good point about festivals and awards and how there is not enough categories for that kind of content. But again, it has to be said that over the last few years, most festivals, including Kalasha, that now has a category for animation, most festivals have now included these categories. Even FESPACO, I believe, introduced an animation category 2 or 3 editions ago. So it is a new trend that we are seeing, and that is that seems to be stronger. In terms of how to incentivize, this particular sector, I don't know. I think yes, awards and festival prizes, these are very important. But at the end of the day, what really matters and what will make a difference is the market. I think the market, if the market is receptive to this kind of content, then it would naturally go. And it is very clear right now that there is a lack of African children's content. So there is really like a big opportunity right now for filmmakers to come in and try to produce this content. And even channels like Cartoon Network or other international platforms like that, they too are actually looking forward to working with African producers, because they realize that the few African content that they have go further. It goes a long way, and it has more impact and generates more engagement than the other types of content. So I think maybe popularizing I'm going back to training, because I think at the end of the day, it's important. It's important for kids in schools anywhere in the country to understand that you can actually produce this kind of content. It's not something impossible. It's not something that requires millions of dollars. It is something that is accessible. So maybe developing workshops at the grassroots level, so that really people understand how you make this kind of content, how you engage with children, and really popularize that thing, so that we can create interest and really more people that will get into that field.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, Nelly, because we have KFCB here, when it comes to incentivizing content creators, I don't know if we still have Nelly. I think she must have gone off. That's all right. So when he gets back, I think I'd like to hear KFCB and understand what they are doing to incentivize content creators to come on board. Because we've had the same
I would like to contribute to that.
Yes. Please do.
I think that one of the ways of incentivizing local content for children, movies or children films or children cinemas, is by, say, the Ministry of teaming up with the Ministry of Education, getting a buy-in from the government, so that the government can maybe sponsor some of these things, or just for them to approve the content and publicize it, or even during the launch of this kind of activities, the government, the Ministry of Education specifically, should be involved, so that parents get the goodwill of the state and other parents in senior positions. And I think that will go a long way in showing that it is approved by the government, it is welcomed by the government, and so children can watch. Just, yeah, one of those thoughts, random thoughts.
All right. And do we feel like when it comes to producing children's content, should we create a space where we also bring in children into the fold to start nurturing their creativity, to give their stories? They may not necessarily produce the content, but is there a space for children to also contribute into storytelling? Dr. Judy?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I want that is one of the ways of also getting buy-in from fellow children. Um, by children participating in such events is one of the ways is that it benefits the film itself by getting a children perspective. What would a child like to see in a situation like this? What are some of, and it may also even enhance creativity within that particular film. So yes, I believe that that would go a long way in enhancing or getting buy-in for local content, so that as content is being prepared, children are gearing up and children are looking forward to the launch of the same. And when that happens, then not radio stations but TV stations will be very quick to grab something like that and put it as one of their programs because of the buy-in that it has, or the publicity that it has gotten.
All right. Perhaps going to the next question, I think I'd like to get input from KFC because over the last few months we've seen a lot of local movies premiering at cinemas, and they've drawn out large crowds because before the notion used to be people are not going to go out and buy tickets to watch movies. Now, what do we also do to make sure that we bring children's movies to the cinemas? Because we have foreign movies and foreign production coming into our cinemas. How do we also support that ecosystem so that we have children's content, especially films, coming into our local cinemas? Mr. Joshua?
Yes, and before making a comment on that, I would like to get back to what Dr. had commented on.
Maybe you can bring your microphone closer to you.
Yeah, I would like to start by taking you back a little bit to what Dr. Judy had commented about Nigerian movies, Nigerian movies and films. It's indeed true that they are heavily consumed in Kenya. But then something interesting is that not all of the Nigerian content is necessarily of high quality. In fact, you will come across a large percentage of them who will tell you, yes, the story is there, but then when it comes maybe to aspects of the sound, aspects of the video quality, it may be poor. So that brings the point that you can still have poor content in heavy demand. Now, back to your question, it's indeed true that the cinema theaters are getting active and back to life because when COVID came in, most of them actually closed shop. But then what can we do to ensure that there is
Hello, Mr. Joshua.
being
Mr. Joshua, your connection seems to be wavering a little bit. Now, if you're joining us right now, we're discussing producing children's content, and I'm joined by Mr. Joshua from KFC, Dr. Judy from East African Center of Human Rights, and Serge from the French Embassy. Mr. Joshua, we seem to be losing
theaters. Maybe
Hello, Mr. Joshua. We lost you at the point where you cited that COVID led to the closure of quite a number of cinemas.
Yes, I hope I'm clear.
Yes, you are now.
Yes, so most of them were affected due to the effects of COVID-19. But then we are getting most of them back to business now. And in terms of your question, what can we do to ensure that we have also children's content being screened? So it all gets back to aspects of providing incentives to our filmmakers to be able to produce children's content, so that one, when we look at the supply part of it, we have them available, and then let them also be able to produce content that is able to reach out to the audience, and the audience in this particular case are the children. And as long as we have what is suitable, what is informative, what is educative, it will definitely appeal to parents, and the parents will be willing to go with their children back to cinema theaters to watch that particular content. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I can see we have Nelly is back. Nelly, there's a question here, or there's a sentiment brought forward based on the licensing when we talk about ease of entry for producers. And that's coming from Facebook, from Nyacharo Victor, who says, I believe having the licensing under one roof is still possible because the government is the taxing agency. So perhaps the question here is there a framework or something being developed by the commissions, so that at the end of the day, filmmakers have a lighter burden when it comes to licensing and what they have to pay, so that it's all done from one body? Is there something that is being...
Thank you. Before I answer that question, I also wanted to contribute briefly to whatever they were talking about, my other colleagues here, that
Yes.
as a regulator, you find that most of the time what we receive for regulation, you'll hardly get anything to do with the children. And probably our children whom we are trying to protect from adult content do not have much of options. They'd rather be watching Cartoon Networks, Disney, and be watching Nick Jr. and so on. So the children do not have many options. Then secondly, I was thinking about the kind of content. Probably our filmmakers need to think of becoming more innovative so that they can come up with something that is similar to or close to these things. They should look at what is it about Nick Jr., what is it about Disney and all that that is attracting our children to that, and probably come with the content that is more child friendly. The children get bored very fast. Then I wanted to talk about the having the license under one roof. Of course, it would be a dream of everybody. It would be good. There's the bill, the film bill that is still being, it is still with the, could I say it has not yet gone to parliament, but actually there was public participation, and those are some of the things that have already been proposed in the film bill. You'll excuse me, I'm on Mombasa Road, you know how that road gets. When a lorry moves near, I even forget what I was talking about. So I was saying that it is really possible and it can be done, but it's also important to remember
We seem to be losing you, Nelly. I think it's because
each and every
I think Nelly, we seem to be losing your sound, maybe because you're on the road. We think the guys at the back of the studio can mute her phone and communicate so that she is able to rejoin. All right, we seem to have lost her in the connection. I'm just looking at more feedback that we're getting. I have Rachel Ndianga, who says, we need a lot of children's content in this country. Otherwise, our children will continue watching the so-called wrong content. And I think that's directed to KFCB. We need content that will impart the right values Guys, can you get me? All right. So
Yes,
before I went off speaking about
Yes, we can hear you.
sorry, I was talking about what Richard Nyanga is saying, that we need a lot of children's content in this country. Otherwise, our children will continue watching the so-called wrong content, and that's directed at KFCB. We need content that will impart right values in the mind. Now, before Nelly went off, she was answering to the question of how can we be able to harmonize the licensing so that we're able to pave way for more of that production of children's content. Now, I can see a lot of filmmakers are joining in the conversation, and it seems or it appears that there is lack of education or a civic way to be able to inform people on what they need to do in this industry. And I think maybe perhaps this falls more on the regulators, that is KFC and KFCB. What are we doing in terms of civic education to reach out to the producers, to be able to bring them to the table of these conversations of that govern their regulation? Mr. Joshua, can we start with you?
Yes, basically your question is on stakeholder engagement. And we have had as about 2 weeks ago, we had an engagement with all the stakeholders in Kenya, that's the associations. There are over 50 in Kenya, so we had a meeting with them, and it was graced by our cabinet secretary. And even in all the policies that we have developed for the benefit of the industry, we have always engaged the film industry so that we have our input in each and every aspect that directly affects them. I also want to contribute a bit to the aspect of licensing that Nelly, before we lost her, was talking about, because about 2 weeks ago we had an engagement as government institutions, KFCB, KWS, those basically who issue licenses that are relevant to the film industry. And that is one of the discussions that we were having. But maybe looking, because that matter has not been concluded, but that is basically where we should be headed. But then the point is, it doesn't matter the number of licenses. It can even be condensed into one. You apply to KFCB, to KWS, then you pay the relevant fee, but end up with one license. The key question here should be that convenience. If I want to get the license, maybe to go and film, how conveniently can I get them? How affordable are they to the filmmakers? I think that is what we should really be focusing on. Because, for example, if we look at our relationship, the relationship between the national government and the county governments, they are independent levels of government. So, for example, when we were debating, how do we, for example, because that is set out in the constitution, how do we go about navigating that to be able to get one license that would also be able to serve the counties? So it really becomes challenging looking at the laws, that is the constitution and other statutes that are in place. So maybe before they are reviewed and those laws are reviewed, what we should be looking at now is, if a filmmaker wants to access a license, how easily can he or she access them? Maybe from just by doing it online without necessarily visiting these offices physically. Then apart from that, the issue of their affordability, I think that's the main concern of our filmmakers.
All right, fantastic. Now we are getting to the tail end of the show, and as we get there, I just want to remind guys that we've been talking about producing children's content, and this is at the Sixth Lake International Pan-African Film Festival. We'll have several other panels coming in the next 2 days before the awards as well, so make sure to participate. And even as we close these, as we draw to the close of these, we're going to leave it online so that you're able to contribute, you're able to add your insights on the same. Now I want to go to Dr. Judy Oloo, and talk to us about how the East African Center of Human Rights is working towards a future where children are protected as we wind up.
Thank you very much. At the East African Center for Human Rights, we advocate for overall right to child protection, and one of them is by looking at their health. And in this case, when it comes to film, I think mental health and emotional health would be one of them, and even the right to recreation is involved. But we also look for, protect children or advocate for protection of children against harmful cultural practices, including harmful content. And so this is where my relevance is in here. And this is why I was talking about protection of various rights of children, like, say, protecting their innocence, which is not necessarily in the books or in the books of law, but then we speak of protection of their dignity, protection of their innocence, protection of them being able to provide consent, or their parents being able to provide consent before they are exposed to certain environments. And then we also have, would I call it, the right to privacy. You realize that certain times when children have now become celebrities or they become stars, it interferes with their right to education and other things. And so we generally advocate for an environment that is friendly for children all around. So that is what we do.
All right, fantastic. Now, I see Nelly is gone, and I needed to ask a question that came earlier for KFCB. So we're going to have Mr. Joshua giving us a summary of the way forward. What's the way forward when it comes to producing children's content?
On the way forward?
Yes, when it comes to producing children's content, that is to Joshua as he closes here.
Yes, I still say, I'm not sure I got you, but I think you're saying what is the way forward when it comes to protection of children, when it comes to issues of cinema and film?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
so my approach is that there needs to be a multi-sectoral approach, and one of the ways is now engaging with people from the film industry, like I'm doing now, that they should be aware of what the rights of children are in various contexts. Children either as consumers or children as participants in various films and cinema activities, or children when it comes to issues of advertisement, where we've seen certain advertisements that are not really in context or are so unrealistic that children may try to do. And also children as consumers of news, where we have to censor some of the things that we know could be scary or could interfere with the psyche of children, knowing that they're sensitive to various things that are very explicit. So multi-sectoral approach to everyone who is in this industry, be it those who license, be it those who are in the film themselves, maybe the editors, maybe the television, the TV stations and other avenues through which the content that you guys produce are shown. Let us all have concerted efforts to protect children, and of course parents, be also on the lookout for what your children are watching. It is very important. Our children are our future, and what we do now counts.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Akwara, before we get your summary on what KFC looks to do as we move forward for production of children's content, I'd like to field one last question that has come from Facebook from Alice Wangoi, who is seeking elaboration of why do producers in Kenya need licenses in the first place, and gives an example where in Tanzania and Zanzibar, there is nil licensing that is done in those shooting locations. So perhaps before we get into your summary of the way forward for the Kenya Film Commission, you can answer to that. Why do film producers need a license?
Yes, film producers need a license because, arising out of our discussions, if you take children's content, for example, we really need to know this is an industry that needs to have order. and the only way to bring order is one, to encourage self-regulation, and number two is to bring now the aspect of government. So the interest of government is, and here as KFC and also as KFCB, is to ensure that all the filmmakers, be it producers, that they operate within the law. We are also in an era where we have many other people. We also have, for example, fraudsters in the film industry. So if we don't put in place checks and balances, if we don't put in place controls like licensing, how we may end up, it may end up being a film market, a film industry for everybody. So the government is basically there to bring order, to make sure that uh, there is a conducive working environment, because this is business, to make sure that there is a conducive business environment for filmmakers, just like other businesses are able to thrive, to do their productions, to do their marketing, be able to reach the market and earn a living like others. Such that if you removed the government, then you would face a situation where there is anarchy. I'm not aware of any industry here in Kenya where there's no aspect of government in it. Even when you go to churches, you will find
Mhm.
a little bit of regulation just for purposes of order and to ensure that various stakeholders' interests are protected. That's why we have government, and also the issues of licensing, so that we are able to know who is doing what and be able to audit the entire process. And
Fantastic.
finally, maybe, yes,
Yes.
finally, maybe as my closing comments, as the way you indicated, as KFC, uh, we will always support the production of children's content, as I have indicated, through our various programs, such as the Film Empowerment Program. And I would like to urge our filmmakers to also focus on this particular market and really produce content that is clean, that is informative, that is educative, so that we don't just produce content for the sake of it. Let's produce content that is also in line with our CBC program, so that at the end of the day,
Yes, Mr. Akwara.
we are nurturing, giving them that they can be able to apply after school. And we will always be available to facilitate them to do their productions in marketing in the film industry. Thank you.
Thank, thank you so much. Now I'd like to go to Serge as we get towards the tail end. I'd like to find out what's the way forward, and how can we as creatives, as filmmakers, get to the French embassy? What kind of support can we receive from there? And what are you doing to ensure that moving forward we have production of children's content happening in the right way?
Okay, thank you, Edwin. I think we have to put resources. Basically, we have to put resources into this sector. I'm hoping that KFC, what has been done with the Film Empowerment Fund, could really be replicated in that specific field of animation and children's content. On our end, our focus will be more on the training aspect. As I mentioned, we have this partnership with ADMI, and we are looking to also organize maybe workshops over the year, several workshops when we have the ability to bring someone to Kenya that can go and train kids and young professionals. We also have the possibility, as I mentioned before, to bring some of the most promising talents to festivals like Annecy. I mean, this year we had Nadia Oloo, for instance, from Nalo Studios, who was here in Annecy as a member of the jury. And so these are the kind of things that we can do and we will continue to do, so that we have more interactions, more synergies, and hopefully more creations out of Kenya. That's basically what we can do at the embassy level. But of course, this comes in as something that is complementary to other systems and other policies that will be in place on the national level.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who has tuned in today. This has been a panel on producing children content at the 6th Lake International Pan-African Film Festival. I was joined by the Director of Strategy and Business Development of Kenya Film and Commission, that is Mr. Joshua Achiya Akwara. I was also joined by a representative from KFCB, that is Nelly Muluka, and then the CEO of East African Center of Human Rights, Dr. Judy Oloo, was here with us, and the audio-visual attaché from the French Embassy, Mr. Serge Noukoue. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for taking your time to come into this panel and share your insight with us. And I hope that this has been an insightful session for particularly filmmakers and people who are interested in getting into this creative field, in understanding how they can navigate and go about producing children's content. Now, there will be more panels coming in from tomorrow, so make sure to tune in on the same avenues, that is Facebook and YouTube. And remember to continue sharing this, as this will be saved here, so that people who did not get a chance to watch it live can watch it later. Thank you so much, and until the next time, have a great day.
Thank you.
So I'm going to invite Dr. Zippy to come in and give our closing remarks for this end.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to remind you that tomorrow at 11 to 1, we are going to have a workshop on film pitching by Philip Karanja, CEO of Philip Productions. And on Thursday, we are going to have Joshua Achiya Akwara coming back to tell us how to do film funding proposals. You know, the Empowerment Fund is just around the corner, so you can't afford to miss that. And tomorrow afternoon, we will also still be having another panel discussion. And on Friday afternoon, the same. So let's stay here. Serge has told us that they are going to have another grant very soon. And we have to know how to do that, how to pitch, so that they can also take us to Cannes when we do children's content. So let's stay here. And thank you so much to all our panelists. Thank you to Edwin also for being a great moderator. And thank you to the audience also for staying here with us. Thank you. And stay tuned on all our pages.
At a time where everything has gone virtual, Lake International Pan-African Film Festival 6th edition takes you there. From 3rd to the 6th of November, we take you there to experience humanity through workshops, panel discussions, open forums, screenings and a gala award. Come and experience this year's festival online. Lake International Pan-African Film Festival 6th edition. Disrupt the narrative.